Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Chris Ostwald. Chris is a second-year student in our part-time MBA class of 2026, and he and I recently connected to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden and the part-time MBA program, his experience so far, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this episode is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Chris Ostwald. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brett. Excited to be here.
It's good to talk with you. How is everything going?
It's going great. It's going great. Just started another quarter. So excited to be getting into operations and then continuing marketing from the summer as well.
Trying to keep count here. I think it's quarter 7. Is that right?
I have not even tried to count quarters, Brett. All I know, we are exactly a year in. So I was getting the notifications of the 1-year anniversary of our R1 pictures on my phone. So not even going to pretend I know what quarter it is, but we're moving right along.
You know what? That might actually be a good approach, because the reality is you get new classes every couple of months, and then at some point you won't have any more classes to take, and you'll graduate.
And then you're done. Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that'll be a bittersweet moment for sure. Yeah. I feel like this point looking forward, I'm excited for it. I'm sure at that point looking back, I'll miss the Mondays and Thursdays.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're right. This is an exciting time here. We have a new class of part-time MBA students joining us, a new class of executive MBA students joining us, and a new class of full-time MBA students joining us. We had 550 or so people all together in the Grove Ballroom here in Charlottesville for the All Darden Welcome, which you may remember that from
Absolutely.
1 year ago last year.
Yeah, definitely. No, wonderful memories. I feel like that was such a fantastic kickoff to the Darden experience. You know, everyone being there, getting to interact with the full time with the execs. I think I actually for the start of R1 sat at a table of PhD students, and so was chatting with some folks that were getting like their PhD in finance, and definitely a different vibe than the MBAs and then the part-time MBAs for that matter. But really exciting to hear about like their backgrounds in research too.
All right. Well, Chris, let's talk a little bit more about you. Tell us more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah, definitely. So right now I'm a principal at Titan Partners, which is a consulting and advisory firm that works solely in the education space. I've been with that firm for about a week short of 5 years now. So another sort of big anniversary coming up in my life. Prior to that, I started my career at another consulting firm in the Boston area. And so, yeah, since I graduated college in 2017, I've spent my entire career in strategy consulting, which has been, really rewarding, really interesting, and I think really sort of mirrors, the case method and the case process that we do at Darden, which is great.
How did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's honestly been on my mind, for a while, probably even since undergrad. So I was an economics and statistics double major, and sort of always like was tangentially, taking some classes here and there in the business school. Was actually a TA for like an advanced marketing stats class my senior year, and so always sort of in my mind was like, an MBA is something that I can definitely see myself pursuing someday. I would say, for a while, I sort of went back and forth. The biggest decision in my mind was always, that sort of taking that leap of stopping work, right? I think that really seemed very like too big of a jump in my mind to sort of, commit to putting my career on pause and taking 2 years off and going somewhere and doing the MBA. And so honestly, I think really, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, the part-time program was a perfect fit because it enabled me to really pursue that degree without needing to put my career on pause or sort of stop working. So yeah, it's definitely been something that, has been on my mind for a while, sort of peaked and ebbed as I saw, other coworkers go off to different schools. And then, yeah, I was really excited to sort of, start that application process and start the degree a year ago now.
Yeah, how did you get interested in Darden? Because if I remember back correctly, when we first spoke, I think you were in Boston.
That is correct. And I think I remember the first question, or one of the questions you asked in my admissions interview was, that we're in Virginia, right? And this is an in-person program. Yeah. So I think really I had a pretty clear picture in my mind about what I wanted out of the MBA experience. And so, like I said, I had a lot of coworkers that had gone off or come from MBA programs, and I think going to a school for undergrad that was very technical, very lecture based. I really wanted the opportunity to sort of explore more topics and more concepts through that like case lens, right, and through that more like discussion based, team based environment. And so, with that in mind, really sort of had a short list of schools in mind that I was thinking about. And I honestly, am not ashamed to say, I think it was an Instagram ad for the Darden part-time program that sort of made all the pieces click, right? I was interested in getting an MBA. I didn't want to stop working. I was looking for that case focus. And that sort of all culminated in that perfect, Instagram ad saying, hey, Darden just launched this part-time program in Roslyn. And so, that was sort of the perfect transition. And yeah, I mean, I think the move from Boston was definitely a shift. I'd been there since 2017, since I graduated, survived the pandemic, met my fiance there. But I think, we were both sort of excited about the opportunity to try out a new city, right? Obviously DC's absolutely incredible. And I was able to move, with my job remote here. And so sort of, again, all those pieces fall into place, and it's, been an exciting journey to settle into DC for a year now, and looking forward to the next handful.
Yeah, not the first podcast guest who's mentioned that an Instagram ad was really what helped them realize that maybe Darden was the place for them. So that does
I
come
know
up here.
I'm a big fan, Brett, of the targeted Instagram ads. I always joke, I'm like, they can listen, they can take my data because they get me really good stuff, and they obviously got me here. So it's worth it to have them tracking whatever data they're tracking.
I will say we've had some part-time MBA students relocate to do the program. So for listeners, Chris's story, being in Boston, relocating to do the program here in the DC area, is not unusual. We've had people move from Chicago, from New York, from Miami, from Boston, in Chris's case, for example, to do the program. And I think people, at this point, just given post-pandemic, maybe more employers a bit more open to remote work, or people have the kinds of jobs you can do from almost anywhere, or there's an office that they can join in the DC area. And so we've seen a little bit of both things. What was that like, though, pairing, starting a new program and moving at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a little bit different for me. Obviously I'm in a fully remote position now, given, our offices are in Boston. And so, I think for me, there was sort of that continuity point where I had the same coworkers, I had the same sort of, work schedule and interactions. I think it's been really exciting, to have the chance to explore a new city, to sort of, have that excuse, right, to move somewhere else, to try out, a new location. I think my fiance and I have both really enjoyed being in the DC area, right? Great art scene, great food scene. We would sort of joke we were like running out of, museums and things to do in Boston. And so it's given us sort of a new exciting city to explore. But definitely, yeah, a big shift, but I think a really good one. And I've definitely, enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, one of the things that we've heard from students who've made this change, so picked up and moved to do other parts of the MBA program, is that they get a very warm introduction to the new location because they have 65, 70 or so classmates who basically live where they're living. I mean, 90+% of our students live within 30 miles or less of our location in Roslyn. So if you are living in DC, it's not going to be too hard to make connections.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Brett. And I feel like the other dynamic here is the learning teams, right? And I think that was a great sort of like softer landing, right? To sort of come here and have those six or eight folks, right, that we're meeting on a regular basis. We're already getting together, right? And it was easy to just say, hey, instead of a virtual meeting on Sunday, let's do brunch on Saturday and hang out for a little bit and get to know each other. And so no, you're totally right. I think between the sort of the size of the program, right, having those like 70 or so built-in locals, and then also that like learning team for the next level down, it's been a good transition.
All right, Chris, I know it's about a year since you've been in the program, but can you remember back to the first quarter or two when you're just getting started? What was that adjustment process like? Obviously, at that point, you have started doing work and life and school all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's always the trifecta there, Brett, right? Work, life, and school. I mean, I would say it was it was an adjustment. I think it was actually maybe not as difficult as I would have assumed. I think one of the reasons that at least I found, that I've sort of been able to balance those things is I've at least found all the classes so far really interesting, right? I mean, obviously, like we do follow the case method, and so it almost feels like every class that you're prepping for, you're almost like exploring this new story, right? You're meeting the characters, you're getting the scene setting, and then you're diving into the data and you're sort of figuring out the answers and the recommendations and the larger lessons at play. But yeah, I mean, I think really I always sort of joke it's just a matter of like setting aside those what used to be blocks of free time, right, and turning that into study opportunities, prep time, reading materials. And so yeah, I think it's been a pretty good seamless transition so far. And then I think there's, again, I mentioned the learning team, right? There's that opportunity to collaborate with others and to learn together. So you're not sort of carrying the entire weight of the program alone. And there's definitely been weeks when we've met and I've been like, wow, I didn't get anything that anybody else said, right? And you have that sort of safety fallback to make sure that you've got the baseline prep for class. And so yeah, I feel like there's sort of some of those support systems built in, and then other things it's just sort of that adjustment of being back to the college vibe a little bit, right? And filling some free time with some studying and some.
How does your learning team work together? I'm curious what your approach has been, because I know for our listeners' benefit, no two teams will approach this in the same way. So how have y'all worked together?
Yeah. So I would say we had a pretty regimented Sunday and Wednesday, like standing meeting time coming right out of R1. I think that was super helpful. Again, to sort of my point, it gave us all that like bridge from the transition period of, okay, what does work life in school look like to, okay, this is work life in school, right? So we sort of had that like, standing every Sunday, every Wednesday, hour and a half, hour long meeting to prep for Monday and Thursday classes. I would say since then we've sort of moved into a more like self-supportive type of setting, which I think has been really good. So we don't necessarily have those like official standing meetings, but I think we've all developed like the relationships and the rapport where we can send stuff through via email and be like, hey, these are the answers that I got. Does anybody else have something different, right? Or hey, the professor was talking about this on Monday. I really didn't understand that. Can we just like hop on the phone and chat about that? Or can we just like text back and forth and sort of figure out what exactly this means for the final, right? So I think, yeah, it's been a really sort of nice transition of like, almost, with any new team, right? They're really formal, standardized. I think that's sort of what a lot of teams did coming out of R1, right? Like the biweekly hour-long Zoom meetings into sort of more of a natural just cadence of, meeting when we need to, talking about the cases that we need to, and then, sharing the answers and insights that we come up with, in forms that make sense for us.
That makes sense that the learning team would get more comfortable working with each other, that the ways you work with each other would evolve. I mean,
Yeah.
the core for the part-time MBA students is 18 months in duration, so 9 quarters. So you've got this quarter you're in, which is quarter 7. You got another quarter 8, then quarter 9. Then you'll be back in Charlottesville for R2, and then you'll start elective. So it makes sense that y'all be pretty proficient at working with each other at this point.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, we've obviously taken classes at this point right now on team dynamics and how things work together. And so, yeah, I think we've sort of transitioned from that like very formal, type of interaction to just something that, feels more natural and feels right. And I think that's, how teams should evolve over time.
Do you have a favorite class from the program thus far?
That's a great question. I honestly really personally, I would say like Finance 1 for some reason. I don't know why. I feel like I didn't enter looking to like that. But I think the professor was Professor Lipson, and I think just had a way of explaining these like really, at least to me, foreign concepts at the beginning in a way that were like so relatable and clear that it really sort of was a really valuable learning experience by the end. That being said, I've really enjoyed all of them for very different reasons, which I think has been great. So I think that's one of the things that's really stood out to me is every class and every professor have been so different that it's almost felt like, 15 different, like totally different classes up to this point in time, which I think has made the whole experience a lot more rewarding.
And that's great. And most of the classes that you have in the core, there's 2 parts to it. There's part 1 and part 2. This is true for full-time MBA students. It's true for executive MBA students. It's true for part-time MBA students. And so you're starting to get to the point in the curriculum though where you're taking the part two of the classes. Can you feel, I mean, obviously what you learn in part two is different than what you learn in part one, but do you feel like you're getting better at being a Darden student at learning? Does the subject matter start to feel a little bit more natural?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there is, a learning curve that you climb up over time. I think both from that content perspective, Brett, and I think even, maybe more than the sequencing of one and two. I think now, we just started operations yesterday, and the professor, pulls up the DuPont chart right at the start, and it's like, okay, all these financial terms, and you're like, hey, you know what? I actually know what all of that is, right? So it's almost like more than the sequencing being helpful. I think it's, you take something from the prior quarter and it's like, hey, I know what, ROA is and ROER and stuff. So I think, that's definitely been, really encouraging, right? To be able to pick up on those things quicker. I think the other part of the learning curve is the case-based, process and method. And so I think now after doing, I don't know, 100 or whatever cases, I think you get quicker and you get better at picking up what's critical, what's important, what are the 5 key things that you need to keep in mind. Whereas I definitely remember the first like learning or leading organizations, right? LO1 is one of the first classes you take, and those cases just felt so like overwhelming, right? It's like, okay, there's 25 pages of information. Like, what do I need to know? And I think looking back, right, if I were to pick up one of those again, I'd be like, yep, okay, these are the 5 things, and this is great, and I know exactly where to go next. So.
Yeah, I always tell folks when you start off reading in this program, you read your first cases, and some of the cases can be quite long, some of them are short. But those long cases, you can be really inefficient at those cases because when you're early in the program, you're reading everything like everything's important. And you then go through a few case discussions, you realize some facts, some pieces of information more important than others. But you kind of have to go through that process to
Yep.
reach that realization.
Yep, totally.
Well, do you feel like you've been able to take what you're learning at school and apply it at work and vice versa, bring what you're doing at work into the classroom? How is that going?
Yeah, no. So that was definitely one of the things I was most excited for about the part-time program and the part-time structure, is really being able to go to class and then bring things into work the next day. My teams have, sort of, we have like a running joke where, depending on sort of the problem at hand and the class that I'm in, I'm like, okay, guys, this is going to be, my one nugget of MBA information for the week or for the project, right? And I'll bring in that like one thing. And I remember it was like managerial accounting way back in the fall that we were on a project, and it's like, okay, like we're gonna, I think it was like something about like contribution margin at that point in time, right? I'm like, okay, hey, actually, like we can't make this recommendation because like they're gonna have a problem with contribution margin, right? And like right now, I'm on a project where we're thinking about recommendations for a client. I'm like, yeah, like the big thing here is gonna be like their WACC, right? Their weighted average cost of capital, like how they think about those investment decisions internally and how money gets tied up. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's been something that's really, I think, stood out almost like more than I had expected. Is there are so many both technical and like softer skills, right? That it's just so easy to go to work the next day or the next week and bring those into the projects at hand. I think really those are obviously some tangible examples. Thinking back to like leading organizations 1 and 2, right? LO1 and 2. Really, I think LO1 focuses so closely on like how to structure teams and how to figure out individual incentives and things like that. That really occurred at sort of a point in my career where I was transitioning to the project manager point. And I think having the ability to have these little microcosms of like, being able to experiment and try out different leadership styles and management styles for the teams that I was dealing with at that point in time. I think it was, almost a daily like ability to apply what I was learning, which was just so fantastic and so rewarding.
Another question about sort of work and school at the same time. So we get a lot of questions from prospective students who look at the schedule and they say, gosh, every other week in person, you got these virtual classes. What if I have to miss a class? Does that happen with current students? And we always tell them, yes, it does happen on occasion. You should try to minimize the extent to which it happens. And, class participation is going to be a portion of your grade. But how have you been able to manage the schedule, which is, Monday and Thursdays right now for where you're in the program, 6 to 9:30 p.m., and these alternating in-person and virtual weeks?
Yeah, I would say that was definitely, a big concern for mine going into the program. It's been a lot easier than I would have thought, Brett, which I think has been great. There definitely have been times along the way where I've missed, a class or two. Generally you reach out to professors, you let them know, you flag it, right? Different ones will have different policies, and if they want you to email in, your case answers, or if you just want to meet with your learning team afterwards to debrief. But I'm actually missing a really important class this quarter for operations for my brother's wedding. So really valid reason, but it's an in-person class. I need to be back in my hometown for his wedding. I emailed the professor, right when the syllabus came out, and said, "Hey, look, here's the deal. I'm on the road. I can't go to this." And he was actually really accommodating, even, sort of making sure that I would still be able to get credit in some way for the activity that we're doing in class, that week. So no, it's been I think really, really, really easy to manage. And it was sort of joke, you just plan your vacations around the remote weeks or the break weeks, right? And other than that, it's been pretty easy to manage. And obviously, yeah, I think the other big sort of theme I would highlight, right, is everyone recognizes that with a part-time program, you're balancing school, life, and work. And so, there's been times where I've needed to be on the road for school or for work or for life, right? And the professors again are always, understanding and accommodating of that. And so it's been easier than I would have expected.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. When we talk with prospective students, obviously you should be setting the expectation with people at home and at work that, you've got these class commitments, they're firm, you need to be there, but stuff happens, things come up. You will occasionally have a conflict, as Chris notes here. And, best way to do that is to reach out as early as possible, to let the program team know, let your faculty know. And the folks who teach in the working professional programs, they also teach our full-time MBA students. They also, may teach our executive MBA students in the case of the part-time MBA faculty. So they understand that people have a lot going on while they're pursuing their degree. But I just wanted to ask that question because you can feel it when you talk to prospective students that people are thinking 33 months,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to miss a class at some point in that program.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I mean, I think, for me, it's been, maybe three or five, one class days over the first year here. And it's been, like I said, a couple weddings, a canceled flight back from my brother's bachelor trip, right? So just, those things come up, Brett. And I think, in every single instance, professors have been, more than understanding, right? If you're proactive about the communication, share your thoughts and what you're missing, right? It's never been a problem.
So a couple more questions for you here, Chris. So when you think about where you are now, so a year into the program, what's been the impact of the program on you thus far?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the easy answer there, right, and it's sort of something we already talked about. I would say like my time management skills have infinitely improved, right? You're managing obviously a lot of things, and you just need to get good at that. And so I think really becoming efficient in sort of new ways at work, right? Finding ways to optimize what I'm doing, finding ways to squeeze in again those study breaks and things like that. I think has been a huge impact. I think even more than that, and I already mentioned this a little bit, some of those hard skills and soft skills have instantly moved into my approach to work and sort of what I'm able to bring to my organization. And so even thinking about some of those finance classes, right? We do a lot of like due diligence work at my firm, so supporting private equity companies, venture capital firms, making investments, and sort of going through, right, like the finance two, which really covers like the process of M&A and the process of acquisitions and valuations and things like that. I think I've gained really valuable new perspectives on what those processes look like for the investors, for the executives, for the other folks in the process that have definitely, improved my ability to sort of think through and solve those problems at work. So, yeah, definitely a lot of, really solid implications from the hard skills, and then also, just knock on effects from, personal life as well.
Do you have a favorite memory from the program thus far? I know you're still very much in this process, right? So you got another. If you're planning to finish in 33 months, you got basically a
Two
little.
more years.
Yeah, that's right. So, a favorite memory though?
Yeah. So my fiance and I were part of the part-time group that went to the Foxfield Day this past year with Olive Garden, which I think was just a really fun experience to kind of like relive the vibe of college again, right? You sort of you go down to Charlottesville. It's a very sort of like small scale horse track that's I would say sort of really in the middle of nowhere, knowing very little about the areas surrounding Charlottesville. And basically everybody from UVA and from Darden gets on buses and goes over. Darden always has a very sort of nice presence at the event, so it's tents and food and drinks. And it's just sort of a really great opportunity to hang out, to experience something new, and again to sort of meet and interact with the full-time folks as well. So I would definitely say that's been a personal highlight, and I know we're looking forward to this coming year's version of that as well. So.
Yeah, I feel like the Part-Time MBA Student Association has done a good job of planning quite a few social activities. I looked at the list last time I was there at Sands Family Grounds. There's all kinds of things coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did a boat cruise a couple weeks ago. We do like a winter formal every year. And then there's obviously some of those overlap with the full-time events too. I think there was a reception or two for like folks that were for full-time MBA folks that were in DC interning this summer. So again, a great opportunity to sort of meet and get to know the broader Darden community that you alluded to at the beginning of the call.
Yeah, we have a upcoming football tailgate in November, I think, down in Charlottesville for one of the UVA home football games. I think there's a basketball game outing last year, or at least a watch party. I will say the basketball ticket's a lot harder to get than football tickets. So a watch party makes a lot more sense to me. I was like, how are you going to get 100 tickets to a UVA basketball game? That's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So how would you describe the part-time MBA community? Because this is another thing we get asked questions about, because people who are looking at Darden, they know Darden is a place where community is important. People who are looking at a part-time MBA program, I don't think they want to give up that part of the experience. Even though they're doing this while working, they still want to make sure that they're around people who that are interested in getting to know them and developing relationships. So how would you describe the part-time community?
Yeah, no, I think it's been, warmer and more welcoming than I would have thought. So you sort of alluded to, right, like moving down here from Boston, you've got that like 70-person, 75-person group where you have those close contacts from R1, right? So from really right off the bat. I think over time, you definitely find the folks that are more similar to you. I think one of the great parts about the part-time program, right, is you really have people that are a handful of years out of college, a handful of folks that are just out of college. So you've got sort of a really broad set of people in the program, and I think it's been really great to meet and interact with different folks and just really sort of build deeper friendships with different folks along the way. Obviously, I've already talked about the learning teams. You sort of have that like closer knit, group from R1 as well. And then, yeah, it's really been, I feel like every class when you get a breakout group, it's like, oh, I get to see these 5 people again, right? And probably not the best thing to say, but a lot of times we're, struggling to stay on topic in the breakout groups and just want to, talk about life and catch up. But no, it's definitely, I think, as social as a group of busy working professionals that are also in school can be, and definitely, been a great community to move into, as we both shifted down to the DC area.
All right, Chris. Well, last question for you here, and I'll mention to your point, there's a pretty good mix of people in the part-time MBA program. For folks who are just learning about our part-time MBA program, the typical experience profile for a part-time MBA student is around 5 to 6 years of work experience on average. So if you look at our recent classes, first 2 classes had 5.5 years as their average years of work experience. This class that just started here just a few days ago, 6 years, but it's been pretty sticky for the middle 80 percentile of these classes in terms of work experience, typically from about 3 to 8 years of experience. You would find most of the students in the class in that band. So a lot of people mid-20s to maybe late 20s, early 30s is really what it's going to be a so-called typical part-time MBA student here at Darden. So, Chris, last question. What's a piece of advice you would share with our listeners as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I can think of a whole bunch of things that I would want to say. I think the biggest like overarching thing is really, finding your why for the program, right? Really understanding what you want to get out of the program, because that's going to be the thing that, sort of gets you through the study time, through the case prep, through those busy points in your life when you're, got a lot going on at work, have a lot going on at home, and have a lot going on at school, right? So really understanding, your drivers, your motivations, and what you want to get out of the program, because I think that sort of dictates so much about how you interact with professors, what classes you'll take for electives, what sort of your process and your journey will look like. I do think Darden does a really good job of sort of having you purposefully reflect and think about a lot of that during R1, right? I know we did a lot of introspection and writing on where we saw ourselves in the future, and why, and what's driving that, and why we're here, and what we want out of the program. And then obviously, between fall one and spring one, there's that winter career class, right? That sort of like 2-week career class, which, even though I'm sort of, very happy in my current job, planning to stay in my current role in the coming years, I think that was another great sort of opportunity to think about, where you are in the career journey, what the next few years look like for you. So I think there sort of are those like points of introspection built into the program, but definitely coming in with that clear understanding of like, yes, this is something that I feel very strongly that it's worth committing to and investing in. I think that'll just sort of help dictate so much else of your experience, and really get you through, Brett, as you mentioned, that learning curve in the first, couple quarters.
Yeah, you mentioned the professional advancement course, which occurs during J term, which is a short 10-day term between the fall and spring semester. It's a course that's delivered virtually, although there is an in-person on the final Saturday of that term. There's an in-person kind of career exploration event that takes place in Sands Family Grounds. Students can also participate in that virtually if they wanted to. But it's a nice time to just kind of reflect and sort of think about where you'd like to go. About a semester into the program at that point. So if you feel like maybe you got your sea legs under you a little bit more, you can start thinking about things like developing your career roadmap and what you'd like to do. Certainly people are thinking about this all along, but this is a really concentrated way of thinking about it. So Chris, so appreciate you're taking the time to join us here. It's great to see you as always. And thanks for taking time for the podcast.
Yeah, definitely, Brett. Thank you so much. It's been a treat to talk with you, and really enjoyed being on.
And that was my interview with Chris Ostwald, a second-year student in our part-time MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA@darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.